Hey, all, welcome back to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with James and Steve. James, what are we going to be looking at today?
This week we're looking at Ridley Scott's The Last Duel, which is a medieval 14th century epic about based on a true story about the last officially sanctioned trial by combat, which pits two old friends against one another in a duel to the death when one accuses the other of raping his wife.
As one does, you know.
Well, yeah, well, yes. How else is one supposed to solve these disputes than, yes, hitting
I,
each other with blunt objects until one dies?
I went into the cinema not realizing until I saw at the beginning, based on true events, I thought, oh, this really somewhat occurred. And so I subsequently, when I got home,
Mm.
Wikipedia did it, and found out that uh,
Jacques Degree?
Jacques Degree and
Oh, Jacques Legris. I think we're going to
Jacques,
have to sort of put a disclaimer in here right from the beginning
yes,
that we are going to be butchering French names,
I
medieval French names, left and right here.
I meant to set this with you before we started. Jean Jean de la. I'll edit some of this. Let's get these names right.
No, I think we should just do this together
Okay, we'll
as
we'll
part of
we'll
the
press
show
through. We'll press through. Okay,
and
is
work them out.
Jean de Corrège
Carouge.
Carouge? That's right,
So
and then
Jean de Carouge
and Marguerite de
de Carouge.
Carouge,
Yeah.
played by Jodie Comer.
And
Uh,
then Adam Driver is Jacques Legris.
and Ben Affleck. It took me a while before I realized that Ben Affleck was playing the Count Pierre de Lesson.
Is that a character? I mean, obviously that's a real person, but is that somebody I should have known who he was? Pierre
He
d'Alençon.
he has a Wikipedia page, the real character. So he was
Okay.
yeah, he was a count. So the plot sets up, as you mentioned, the two best friends slowly being drawn into a conflict. I thought at the beginning of this movie, I was feeling played out, James, the Man in the Iron Mask with Guy Pearce and Jim Caviezel. I felt like I've got two best friends that are slowly seeing jealousy, and you see this end point coming where something bad is going to happen. They obviously went in a different direction, but at least at the beginning of this, as certain conflicts were starting to arise in their friendship, I was starting to connect it with A Man in the Iron Mask.
Man in the Iron Mask or Count of Monte Cristo?
Shoot, Count of Monte Cristo. I meant. I'm off to a good start today.
Is this where we should call you a Dumas?
Yes. Dumas. Yes, that's good. Touche.
Um,
Touche.
um, yeah, I mean, it's definitely sort of the story of an eroding friendship as much as anything else, and both of these men are hungry for power, hungry for recognition, hungry to remain in the good graces of the count and by extension the king. Um, but they approach the matter in very, very different ways, and obviously as the central crime of the piece, the rape, and which itself comes into question of was it a rape or was it not?
Right.
As that sort of shifts or should shift the focus of the story sort of away from these men and um, their burgeoning rivalry
Mm-hmm.
onto the plight of this poor woman. I think one of the great themes of the story, or sort of issues of the story, is the fact that it doesn't really move the focus away from these two men. And even though you're talking about whether or not this woman was violated, it remains all about the men,
Yeah.
all about their rivalry, and the sort of the beef that they have with one another. And this is just a spark that ignites the fire, essentially.
Well, it brings up a point which I thought was a daring move to do by Scott and the producers, is to not retrofit modern sensibilities into this movie. What we got was a very brutal picture of what life was and among genders in the 1300s. And as I'm watching this, um, the whole Me Too, it's hard to not have Me Too running through my mind. And there is a tendency at times to equalize strength. I'll give the example of when the rape was occurring, and
Mm.
as difficult as it was to watch twice, um, I found that very, very hard to watch twice. Once, but then you see it again from another perspective. Is modern sensibilities and what we've come to see in movies and TV shows, say the last 20 years, is a man is going to rape a woman and then she drop kicks him. She does a spinning flywheel because she can kick ass as much as any guy. And the reality is, Adam Driver, when she starts to run away, says, "You can run, but you're not going anywhere."
Mm.
This is going to happen. And that became even more disturbing for me when the reality of what real rape and what tragedy hits women, rather than sometimes I think movies in recent times have conveyed an unreality to a situation. And I give the producers credit and Ridley Scott credit for showing us a brutality of the 1300s. And I was kind of encouraged almost to say is that we've come a long way, baby.
That's interesting because I think my takeaway from it is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was with you part of the way when you were like, it didn't try and force modern perspective or modern sensibilities upon the issue, and I agree with that. And I think the reason for that, tragically, is that one of the points the film is trying to make is that 600, 700 years later, things haven't really changed so much,
Mm-hmm.
and that we are still seeing that women are not, victims in general are not being taken by their word.
Mm-hmm.
There is still this burden of proof that needs to be provided
Yeah.
by the victim. That you have these men in positions of power who are still able to exploit that on a daily basis
Mm-hmm.
in order to, for whatever reason they want, and that women in any position are still fighting sort of an uphill struggle just to be heard, let alone recognized and appreciated and able
Yeah.
to succeed.
No, I wouldn't. I couldn't agree more. No, there's no difference there because if anything, in the court scene, it's still, did you do anything to lure him? You know how men can be. It's still the
Mm.
burden of proof comes on the person who is violated, and I totally concur that the things haven't changed in many many ways. I guess I was just kind of reflecting on sometimes the reality that movies and TV give us as opposed to real life. And what you're discussing is the real life situation in the 21st century versus what I think sometimes is not always realistically portrayed in movies and TV, particularly in the
Mm.
last 20 years.
Yeah, no, I think they've given female characters in cinema recently sort of a degree of agency that
Mm-hmm.
they hadn't had in the past. Like you're saying, if they're attacked, they're now portrayed as being far more capable.
Yeah.
Far better equipped and prepared to defend themselves. Um, it brings up an interesting point in the film because when Legree, who Adam Driver's character, is defending his actions, he is being accused of forcing his way into her home when her husband was not there and raping her. And he sort of says, "Oh well, sure, she put up a bit of a fight because she's a lady, but she totally wanted it. This we are in love. We are in love. We were a couple. We were destined to be together. So of course, yes, she pushed. She resisted at first because but that's, and he twists it by saying, well, that's a sign of her respectability. It's a positive judge of character,
Right.
that she would protest a little,
Mm-hmm.
put up some sort of theatrical protestations. But of course we knew what the conclusion was going to be, which is such an awful, horrible thing to say. I have one of the things I enjoyed, and I do mean I enjoyed. There's some tough stuff in this movie, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I enjoyed were some of these outrageous statements that that have been put into the script for various characters to say. One of them being this statement by Adam Driver's character, but also in the trial, priests coming out and saying, was it if you get raped, you can't get pregnant. That's just science.
Right. I remember that line
and things like this. And it's just so kind of outrageous. I mean, I think we should point out a few facts here, that the script was written by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, who are in the movie, but they wisely bring on a female writer as well, Nicole Holofcener, who is known. She's a Academy Award nominated screenwriter for Can You Forgive Her, the Melissa McCarthy movie from a few years ago. It's very good. She also wrote and directed Enough Said, which I believe was James Gandolfini's last movie.
Yes.
From a little while ago, and she's directed a whole load of TV, Orange Is the New Black, and Gilmore Girls, going back some, and Cold Feet, and 6 Feet Under, I think, and all kinds of stuff. So very sensibly, I mean, this project, I think, gained some publicity early on because it was the first time Ben Affleck and Matt Damon had come together to write something since Good Will Hunting, which obviously was their big break, and they won the Oscar for it, for their screenplay. And this is when was that? Late 90s. So this is like 25 years later.
Yeah, quite a while.
But because of the nature of the story, and the story is all about perspective. It's about taking one person's word against another person's word. They have wisely brought in a female voice because it's all about, the female perspective is so important here. Similar to another film we were talking about just recently, No Time to Die. That's a film that, there's this big sort of butch, masculine sort of action movie that was in sore need of a female perspective, and so they brought in Phoebe Waller-Bridge for that. And I think in both cases it's really paid off.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more that they were quite wise to bring in the female voice, because that voice comes through. Because even though I had kind of said earlier, they didn't retrofit for modern sensibilities, they do give Jodie Comer as much agency, I felt, as you could give a 13th century person, because even under pain of, obviously the two men are going to duel to the death, and God is the judge. Whoever wins this duel, God is siding with, and the other is the guilty party. And if it turns out to be Matt Damon who dies, then Jodie Comer will be flayed and burned alive, and it just horrific consequence. And despite her being made aware of this, she still says, "I was raped. That is the truth." And I was thinking that's a powerful statement even for audiences today and for women today, in light of the Me Too movement, that maybe we're not going to be flaying and burning women alive, but there's been a lot of character assassination of women who've spoken up. We might be a little more civilized in the physical consequences, but the reality is people get canceled, they get ostracized, they get demeaned, they get, and it was good to see that message come through despite this heavy testosterone fueled movie.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, really. But that these mechanisms were put in place way back then to silence women, as simple as that. To scare them into not saying anything. But also, the entire system, she has no place within that system. When she first sort of confides in her husband that, while you were away, fighting for king and country, this is what happened. Your quote unquote friend turned rival, forced himself on me. And she says to him, this is what happened. His first response is, "Are you telling the truth?" And I can't believe my honor has been challenged like this.
He's the offended party, not her.
Exactly. He's the offended party. But then she says, "Look, I need you to be on my side on this, because she has no voice on the public stage. She cannot bring her case to court. He must do it." And at that point, women were essentially regarded as property. So because which is another great bit of dialogue where it's not a case of assault. It's not like a violent crime. It's not considered a violent crime. It's considered something to do with abuse of property or something like that.
Yes.
Which is just, which is true to the period, but utterly outrageous because of that.
Yeah.
It's so. I'm so happy that the film didn't shy away from just boldly speaking out all of these outrageous truths and sentiments from the period, because they're completely shocking, but they need to be highlighted in that way. And I think one of the things that surprised me and helped me sort of enjoy the film, helped me get through some of these dark moments in it, is that it's quite funny. There's a fair amount of humor I found in the film, and I don't think it was just me. You know, they do sort of highlight how ridiculous a lot of this is, and although yes, that's horrible, it's also ridiculous in some cases.
And let me bring up Ben Affleck then at this juncture, because to me he provides that light humor. And if I'd like to say this is one of the best roles I've seen Ben Affleck in a while. I enjoyed watching Ben Affleck's character. I mean, he was light and he was witty, and he brought a much needed element into the film, which if it wasn't there would be almost too dark and too dreary.
Yeah, no, it's not often that you can say Ben Affleck provide the comic relief.
No, that's
in a movie. You know, certainly in recent years, he's so often like this really sort of heavy, morose, brooding kind of character.
Batman, you know, he's Bruce Wayne. He's that kind of character. In fact, I didn't, if I'm honest, James, I knew he'd co-written the script. I didn't realize he was in the film, and I didn't recognize him at first. It took me a moment, because he's got the blonde hair, and I'm sure we'll get to the hair issues in a moment. But he didn't immediately look like Ben Affleck. But then,
it's a departure for sure. He has got quite a weird look. But yeah, no, I was very pleasantly surprised by him as well. He's playing this kind of sort of foppish cad, if you like. I mean, his character is absolutely awful. He's like this despicable, spoilt, sort of minor league royal who just has all of the benefits and none of the responsibilities of being wealthy at a time when that meant everything. And spends his time just sort of drinking and shagging around, essentially. And is arguably the spanner in the works that sort of destroys the friendship between Matt Damon and Adam Driver's character, because it's where they stand in his good graces that essentially sort of fuels this rivalry. And increasingly you see Adam Driver's character being favored over Matt Damon, even though he's not a warrior. Matt Damon is like a sort of a career soldier who has been out fighting in the 100 Years' War, fighting the British over and over and over again for the crown, and just sees his title and his land and his wealth and status being stripped away from him and just handed over to his buddy, who's Adam Driver's sort of confidant, if you like, consigliere almost to Ben Affleck's character. And you can see why it gets so frustrating, because he's essentially just completely usurping his position without earning any of it.
You feel for Matt Damon, but I love how Ben Affleck explains the situation, because when Adam Driver is trying to defend his friend, he's trying to defend and remind Ben Affleck that, you know, he's loyal to the king, he's fought many wars, he's bled for the king, he's bled for the country. Ben Affleck essentially says, yeah, but he's uninteresting. he's boring. Do you really want to be around a boring person like that? You know, basically, Ben Affleck's character, I don't care what he's done for the country, and well done if he's done that kind of thing. But I want an interesting party guest around me, and you're the interesting party guest, not him. That's really what it comes down to.
Precisely. It reminds me of that moment when Adam Driver comes to talk to him about something, catches him in flagrante with a bed full of women. And the first thing Ben Affleck says to him is, come on in, take your pants off.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm here on business, and explains the whole thing. And he's like, yeah, we'll get to that. Come on in, Take your
Yeah.
pants off. It says it again. I thought that was really, really funny. Okay, I want to ask you something because you said just then that you really feel for Matt Damon. You find him sort of sympathetic. Um, how do you feel that your sympathies change or shift as the film goes on and as you hear the same story from three different perspectives? Because the way that the story is told is very similar to Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon,
Hmm.
where three different people involved in the case have the opportunity to tell their side of events. And the film is really divided into these sort of three chapters where you see the same story told three times from three different perspectives. First from Matt Damon's point of view, then from Adam Driver's point of view, and finally from Jodie Comer's point of view.
Yeah.
How did your sympathies shift as the film went on?
They definitely shifted. But let me give a quick caveat in that I thought the three perspectives. I love the convention employed in films where we get to see viewpoints and perspectives and something retold from another set of eyes, because I find that just really shows us how humans view reality around, and that we all kind of give ourselves a little more grace. We give
Mm-hmm.
others a little more judgment. Having said that, I thought there wasn't enough differentiation in these different viewpoints to justify the convention completely. Um, Having said that, obviously there are noticeable shifts. And coming to the Matt Damon Decourge character,
What's his name? Yeah,
definitely
Decourage or
in his
something.
viewpoint, he is the more noble. He is the more, when you see that first third of the film through his viewpoint, he's always right. Adam Driver is always constantly disintegrating as a friend around him. And he's always being very thoughtful to Jodie Comer, his wife. And obviously that perspective changes when it gets to Jodie Comer's view of her husband. You suddenly see a lot more brutish of a man, a lot less thoughtful as he sees himself. So yes, my image of Matt Damon did shift subtly, but to answer your question, if you compare him to 21st century sensibilities, he's a brute. But within his 13th century or 1300s, 14th century culture, I think he was one of the better guys. Like if you're going to be married to somebody, he would be the choice, because despite his brutishness at times and his mannerisms, I think he genuinely loved his wife. He genuinely cared about her within the parameters that society allowed for.
That's interesting, because I think that I felt that the one character that suffers most from these shifting perspectives is Matt Damon's character,
Mm.
and I think it's a very sort of wise decision for the film to open from his point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And we're used to seeing Matt Damon play the good guy, and
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
the rest of it. You just look at it, the last film he did with Ridley Scott, The Martian. And he's
yeah,
just straight up hero. Uh, and the way he is put across is that he is the courageous soldier, and he falls in love with Jodie Comer's character for the right reasons. And even though that she's from a family of a traitor's family, she's the
mm-hmm.
daughter of someone who was sided with the British and then did shift his allegiances later. He sees the goodness in her and he takes her in and all the rest of it. Then as the film goes on, he just becomes increasingly petty and, like you say, brutish and
Mm-hmm.
boorish and awful and poorly behaved. And I think certainly in Jodie Comer's version of events, doesn't treat her very well at all. I think I think a lot of it is in response to his reaction to the rape.
Yeah,
But I felt that he comes across increasingly badly till by the end I really wasn't on his side anymore at all.
right.
He reminded me of his role in The Departed, which is one of the few films I could think of where he's a bad guy, and
Mm-hmm.
he's awful in The Departed.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
hate him. He's trying to be sort of charming and smarmy and all of that, but he's just the worst guy. And I felt that there was an element of that performance here, and it was kind of great to see because I think he's very good at it. I agree with you to a degree that I think the shift in personality in perspective didn't have a strong enough impact, particularly in the rape sequence.
Yeah.
Because first of all, you see it from Adam Driver's perspective, and he's supposed to be the one sort of defending his actions. And while I understand that the film is trying to make the point that he sees what he did as not being wrong, he essentially still admits to forcing himself upon her.
Right.
But what was fascinating was how his attitude to her was presented. You know, he's a classy, learned, educated guy. He recognizes those traits in her. You know, she's well read. She can speak many languages at a time when not many women could claim that. And they make a point of noting that Matt Damon's character isn't that interested or impressed by those qualities. He just wants a son, essentially, and that is proving difficult, and that is a bone of contention in their relationship.
Yeah.
And so what I liked about the shift of perspective is that from Adam Driver's point of view, they would be a far better match. You know, and you kind of buy into this idea that he sees her in a way that her husband doesn't, and there are scenes of flirtatious conversation between them at parties and whatever. So that although what he does is awful and is wrong, and she says no, you understand. You kind of can feel where he's coming from. But then when you see it from her point of view, none of that happened. There was no chemistry. You know, they didn't even have half those conversations.
That was probably the best use, though, of the different perspectives, is when you see his perspective, which is the middle perspective, the Adam Driver one, you think, okay, she does kind of fancy him. She's drawn to him in different ways, but she's maintained her dignity. There's a line she's not going to cross, but she flirts with that line a little bit. But then when you see it through her eyes, no, she never really got close to that line. And let me ask you real quick, did I see it right when they introduced the perspectives, when they got to Jodie Comer's, the final one? I thought they emphasized the truth.
They did.
Wasn't my eyes playing? I'm thinking, did they just say that? So are they inferring that, even though we're seeing three perspectives, this is what really happened?
There is that implication, yes. I mean, I think the title card comes up each time and it says the truth according to the name of the character.
That's right, yeah.
And in that third case, when the title fades out and they just let the two words "the truth" hang there on their own for a moment before those fade out.
That's right.
I'm not sure. Yeah, and that was one of the things that I don't think was needed, because I think going into the film, you already kind of know where the story is going, in as much as, you know, they wouldn't be telling this story if she hadn't been raped, I think it's fair to say. Yeah, and I felt that it didn't really need for me to overstate the fact that, you know, her version is the truth by literally labeling it as such at the end. I think, you know, it removes any ambiguity from that final chapter even before it begins. And it's so far, I think it is such a shift in terms of how these men behave around her and how they behave to her, that I think it would have been more interesting just to have left it a little more ambiguous.
Yeah,
I think the fact that final chapter begins and the film essentially says to you, this is what really happened.
Right.
I think was a little bit. I was like, well, no, come on. I thought the whole point of this is that you know, you need a little air of ambiguity, because that's going to be so small anyway. So I felt, yeah, it's a little kind of heavy-handed in that regard, but I felt that so much of it in the shifts of the performance and line readings. So you're essentially seeing the same characters do the same things three times and say the same things three times. But I just felt that the performances were beautifully nuanced, so that with each take and with each line reading, you're getting a completely different vibe of these characters every time. And I felt that stuff worked really, really well.
Jodie Comer, you know, as much as difficult as it was, as I mentioned, to watch a rape scene, but to watch it twice, but seeing it through her eyes, and you could see the tear coming down her face that was not evident when Adam Driver was telling the story. There was real with Adam Driver, there was almost, like you said, a lady putting up resistance, as a lady should. But in Jodie Comer's version, she was violated,
Yeah.
and that came through very crystal clear to me. And this is where although I agree with you that I see the degeneration of the status in my eyes a bit of the Matt Damon character. To me, he's not the villain that Adam Driver is, because as much as I can sympathize with Adam Driver over Matt Damon on just about every other level, um, a man who
You have a critic.
hey, hush. I was just waxing
Building.
eloquent.
You're
I
building
was
to your
building
big
to
point.
these dogs.
They can sense danger. Yeah.
A man who professes his love and talks about how they share almost a spiritual bond with one another. Oh, but now I'm going to rape you. It's I'm sorry that there's one villain in this movie, and it's Adam Driver. And when he's kind of, although I don't endorse duels to the death and what they do with Adam Driver's body at the end, there was a certain catharsis for me seeing him getting his just desserts.
I agree with that. So yeah, there's definitely catharsis from seeing Adam Driver die, but I felt that it's kind of undercut slightly by what is supposedly this sort of moment of victory as Jodie Comer is helped off the pyre, if you like, where she was going to get burned, and her victory is just riding off back home with Matt Damon, where one assumes her life is going to continue to be miserable, and where they've got to raise Adam Driver's son together.
Science shows that rape cannot produce a child. We learned that in the movie, James. Come on.
It must have been, formed out of love, if she enjoyed it.
Yes.
The wonderful conversation she has with doctors about her sexual experiences are just so awkward
but like you said, there are segments of our society where those conversations haven't changed much in 700 years.
Yeah, that's terrifying, quite frankly. Yeah, it's not good.
Maybe moving on a little bit, James, how do you think Ridley Scott brought a medieval style? How do you think the overall film addresses the subject they're looking to tackle?
I mean, I'm a big fan of Ridley Scott, actually, and he's always he's called like a visual filmmaker, and he sometimes gets criticism for sort of ignoring his actors at the expense of, or highlighting the artistry at the expense of the actors. I don't think that's the case here. I think all the performances are really strong. But one thing that I really appreciated, and that you kind of knew you were going to get going into a Ridley Scott movie, is that you are going to get this sort of authentic feel of a sort of medieval epic. And this, although it's kind of a fairly intimate story of sort of three people, it's told on sort of the biggest canvas possible. This all happens with the backdrop of the 100 Years' War, and Ridley Scott does not hold back from that. So you do get sort of big battle sequences, bone crunching, swords skewering,
blood,
blood, knights in armor, and all the rest of it. You get visceral action scenes, and then you get sort of the aftermath of that. You get the bawdy taverns and the banquets and the castles and all of that kind of stuff, and so you get this very rich sense of time and sense of place, which obviously all builds to the last duel of the title, which I thought was handled really, really well. I mean, it's savage, it's vicious, as it is meant to be, and the fact that this was a kind of church and court sanctioned, method of determining the outcome of a case like this is absolutely ridiculous. But it's so brutal. I think a lot of the times in the past, when you think of jousting tournaments in sort of Robin Hood times or whatever, there's a kind of sort of romanticism to it. It seemed as quite I'm not sure how to describe it, but there's a definite lack of violence
Yeah. Yeah.
involved. It's all sort of, it feels all performative, and it's a pleasant day out in the sunshine where there will be some jousting and some archery and what have you. This is not that.
Yeah.
This is as down and dirty and brutal and savage and violent as one could imagine, and it's
and smelly, like what you're mentioning about, you picture Errol Flynn in Robin Hood, and somehow, even though you can't smell him, somehow you just know he smells like cologne. Whereas
absolutely,
looking
French
at looking at Adam Driver and Matt Damon wandering out around those castles in battle armor, I'm just thinking those guys got to smell so bad. And when he goes in to kiss Jodie Comer and he's got that gristly beard, I'm like, oh, it's
sure. When he's been away at war for weeks, if not
months, I'd say, yeah,
and comes back and he's still caked in mud. Yeah, he's gonna hum something
yeah,
chronic.
He hasn't showered yet.
No, and I think that there is an element of that in the fact that this is a story about sex, essentially. Whether it was consensual or not, and any kind of intimacy in medieval times must have been a wholly different experience.
I'm sure.
More, just it's their bedroom, their married wedding quarters must have smelled like a stable. Everything about it would have just been completely sort of unpleasant.
But
in the best of situations, and so it just adds that extra level of just unpleasantness to it all.
Absolutely. So how do you feel? You mentioned it's a strong cast. Let me ask you about the cast, but let me just start by saying, at first I felt comfortable except for Matt Damon. I felt when I was watching Matt Damon in the first few scenes, I almost felt like, I don't know if you remember Notting Hill, where Julia Roberts would be talking to Hugh Grant and they would flash to scenes about, she would be talking about how she has to play the space adventurer, and she would be in these different movies, even though she's Julia Roberts. She's basically playing a version of herself, more or less. And she's in all these outlandish surroundings. And when I was watching Matt Damon in the first few scenes, that was the image I was getting. Like, why did they cast Matt Damon? Because I enjoy Matt Damon in an Ocean's 12 movie or a Bourne movie. But I kept thinking, surely there's a good English or French character actor that would bring out this character so much better than me constantly feeling I'm watching Matt Damon pretending to be a knight. Having said that, though, I thought by the end of the movie, he kind of won me over mostly.
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid point. I think the short answer to that is because it was always his project.
Yeah.
I think the book came to him, and obviously he wrote the script with Ben Affleck, so I think it was always going to be them doing it. I wondered whether the original idea was that Ben Affleck would play the Adam Driver role.
I believe it was, and I believe that they brought Adam Driver in. I don't know the exact reason, but I do remember reading that, because it makes sense that the Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, it would just having this rivalry, which almost mirrors in some way what they've experienced, their various ups and downs over the last 27 years or so since they won the Oscar together as young men. It would have been the natural fit. But I think then we would have been even more lost and not able to absorb that world, because we'd be seeing, oh, that's Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Whereas Adam Driver, in my opinion, we often talk about in our reviews about the gravitas, and Adam Driver brings a sense of gravitas to every role I feel he's ever been in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a better actor than Ben Affleck. I mean, Ben Affleck's a decent actor, but Adam Driver is a better actor, and I think it's just, that is an objective truth. And I think that it's a role that really needed it. I wonder, because obviously Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are old friends, and I think that might have played in nicely had they chosen to play these two friends who fall out. But I think the dynamic also works the other way, because when it's set up, there is an established, they're never seen as close, but there is an established relationship between Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's characters. And then Adam Driver is the wedge that comes between them, and I think that wedge is far more impactful than Adam Driver coming between Matt Damon and his wife.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's not really what the film is about. But I think all of them do really great work. I think part of the detachment that you feel at the beginning, which I felt too, is you're watching Americans play French people with bizarre, vaguely British accents.
Yeah, yeah,
And so you're like, I'm not entirely sure what this world is supposed to be exactly.
yeah.
Um,
You got two
and
guys
they
from
have,
Boston. You got two guys from Boston out there. You know, they just came from a Red Sox game, and now we're swinging swords with each other.
that's not bad. and yeah, and that's so yeah. I think that's a lot to do with it, and also the fact that they're wearing these ridiculous wigs. I mean, Matt Damon looks like he's playing in the German Bundesliga in like the 1980s or something.
I was going to say, I had Matt Damon's hair circa
Oh, wow.
1988. You know, that was, I could
I'm
have been
sure
a
you
French
wore it
knight.
better.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has a historical precedent. I'm sure it is period specific.
Oh,
You know,
it does have a historical precedent, 1988.
Well, there you go. You know, but so I have faith in Ridley Scott and his team because everything else about the movie feels sort of very authentic and of its time and what have you. And then you just have, I think in Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's case, both of them just have ridiculous hair.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, I get it. It's fun, to dress up and look kind of stupid. But they do look kind of stupid.
Yeah.
So it takes a while for you to accept them as anything other than ridiculous looking actors in silly wigs. But yeah. So I think that it's such a rich. Ridley Scott does create such a sort of a rich and authentic feeling world out there that I think you do sort of slip into it fairly quickly, and so you go along with the bits that are a bit wobbly maybe.
And we haven't really mentioned Jodie Comer, but she, I think she's like Adam Driver. She's an amazing actress with an incredible career ahead of her because when I was watching her, I thought she was a perfect casting choice. And she brings those scenes that she did are not easy scenes. They're not easy to watch. I'm sure they're not easy to film.
I agree with everything you're saying, and I think it's another case of incredibly smart casting, because I think casting is so important, particularly in a big movie like this, because with very recognizable actors. Because as an audience, you can't help but approach the movie with certain baggage, and I think that's why, for example, as I was just saying about how they positioned Matt Damon and Ben Affleck and Adam Driver as actors in the piece, not the characters necessarily, but because we expect certain things from coming to see Ben Affleck or coming to see Matt Damon or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that works incredibly well with Jodie Comer, because you could have had anyone come in and play that part. It's a big juicy part. I'm sure it attracted a lot of A-list talent. You could have had your Jennifer Lawrence or whomever come in and play that role. But it makes perfect sense to bring in someone like Jodie Comer, who obviously, she's great. She's got a lot of credentials, but is still relatively sort of unknown, especially when held up against such big names,
right,
as Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. And that helps with the dynamic within the film, where she is a woman who means nothing up against these men in her world, and it's irrelevant the fact that she's got an education and she can she reads books and she can speak languages in the same way that Jodie Comer has a very long and storied and respectable television career in the UK. And
yes.
It's only since Killing Eve in the last couple of years where she's broken out internationally. People, savvy people now go, oh, I know who that is. They might not even know her name, but they're like, okay, I know who that is. But it helps.
Yeah.
It helps position the character in the audience's mind, because you're like, okay, I don't know who that is, So therefore, she is not, just her level of status in the cast, if you like. You've got A-list, Oscar nominee, Oscar winner, and plus girl.
Yeah.
In a way, but we know that she's gonna hold her own, and that she's gonna come through. She's got the skill set, and she does brilliantly. And if you think she's got like 1 or 2 scenes with other women. Pretty much all her scenes are with men, and men who control her destiny or are fighting to control her destiny.
I forgot the name of the actress who plays Matt Damon's mother, but I've seen her in a lot of films. She's a wonderful character actor, and I don't have that note right here. But that interaction that Jodie Comer has with her, because obviously there's this animosity and this rivalry between Jodie Comer and Matt Damon's mother. And when Matt Damon's mother reveals that she too was raped, that was a wonderful scene, just to kind of highlight, like you're saying, the interaction she has with other women in this. I thought that was, and I wish I could remember her name, because she's a wonderful character.
Harriet Walter.
Okay.
Her name. I had to look that up, and I'm just trying to think what I've seen her in, but she's basically been in every period drama. And she's in Killing Eve as well, actually.
I see BBC British audiences would be more familiar with Jodie Comer, but Jodie Comer was recently the lead in with Ryan Reynolds in Free Guy.
This is true. But I think she probably made both of these movies at about the same time.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah.
And she's great in that. That's a very different movie, but that's a good one too. But this is great. I think people. We're at that time of year now where you have to start kind of talking about awards potential for movies, for big movies. I think a movie like this might get some recognition for like its production design and things like that.
Cinematography.
It looks great. I don't think it's going to be a big awards contender because I think its reception has been a bit mixed. But I think if anybody does, I think it will be Jodie Comer. I think it's the kind of breakout role that awards bodies like to recognize, at least with a nomination. I'm not suggesting that she's probably going to win anything, but it's just like, we like what you're doing. You've come over from the small screen to the big screen now. It's and that kind of just nod that.
I could definitely see the Academy giving Jodie Comer a Best Supporting Actress nom for this.
That kind of thing. For sure. Just closing now, James. Before we give a final rating, any final thoughts on The Last Duel? Okay, well, I was pleasantly surprised. Is I think my main takeaway from it. I remember watching the trailer, and really the trailer, you're like, okay, it's just a big period epic, and it looks very wiggy. You can't help but just focus on what is this hair that everybody's, and you're like, okay, and then there's some. It's the hair, man. It is. It's the hair, and I think, and it plays it dead serious, and it's obviously like an issue movie, and it's all about believing women. And I came away going, that looks an incredibly sort of over earnest movie that I think is going to be undermined by the unintentional campiness of its sort of costumes and what have you. So I was pleasantly surprised when I came away, when I enjoyed the film far more, and I've said this a couple of times, but I found it a far more entertaining and at times humorous and sort of exciting and epic movie, which does obviously have this very serious and relevant and timely issue at the center of it. But I felt that by and large, the way that they handled it was innovative and exciting, and the performances were strong, and the fact that it was just a far more engaging and enjoyable experience than I was expecting from the trailer. And so, I was able to come away going, I'm pleasantly surprised, rather than it just being like, it's a big stupid movie. I'm not far off in my assessment either. I probably went into it a little less understanding what I was in for. But knowing Ridley Scott had directed it, I thought this is going to be a visual feast. And I feel the same way. I went in with a little trepidation, knowing I'm going to see Ben Affleck and Matt Damon playing knights, which again, I enjoy Ben Affleck. I enjoy Matt Damon, but not normally in that setting. But it worked.
And so what are we going to give out of 5? Broadswords or mullets?
Yeah, mullets. It's got to be mullets.
Mullets.
I'm going to give this, a nice, thick, wavy 4 mullets out of 5, I think.
Okay, good. I'm going to give it. I'm trying to decide: are we allowing halves? Because
Sure. If it's
I'm
out
going to
of
give it.
5,
I'm
I
going to
think you're
give
fine.
it. I'm going to give it 3.5 mullets because I don't I don't know if I liked it as much as you did, and so if I gave it 4, I feel like I'm misrepresenting myself. I
Fair
want to
enough.
give it. It's worth a watch. I'll give the caveat. 3.5. When I give a 3 or above, I think it's worth watching.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, a
Good.
3.5 is perfectly
Yeah.
perfectly respectable score. So it's the mullet, but with very closely shaved sides, is what you're
That's
going
right.
for.
That's right. Well, until next week, let's say goodbye to our audience. If you don't forget to subscribe, and it's great doing this, James. I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, same. I'm really enjoying myself. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed already. Please sort of share it around, tell everybody. Let us know what you think, like, comment, all the rest of it, and let us know if there's anything in particular that you'd like to hear us cover in the future, because we're always looking for new ideas.
Absolutely, James. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
See you next time. Bye.